It's no secret. Buying a single family home in San Francisco is expensive. There's nothing cheap about it. So what do if you want to own property in San Francisco, but you can't afford some of the houses that are there, especially if you want to live in neighborhoods like Coal Valley, Noe Valley, or Portola. It gets really expensive in some neighborhoods, and maybe you don't want to live in one of the neighborhoods that are further out from San Francisco. You want to be closer to where you work, downtown, whatever happen to be things that are happening. So what do? Well, we do what everybody else does in the country. When you want to own, but you don't have as much money to buy the single family residence, you buy condo. Condos are great. They're a great alternative to the single family home, and you can also move into a neighborhood that you really want to live in. San Francisco has tens of thousands of condos. You can live in any part of San Francisco, and condos are, of course, cheaper than homes. So you can find the neighborhood you want to live in. Maybe you want to live in Hayes Valley or Mission Dolores. So you can live there. It's cheaper and it's less expensive to live in a neighborhood where you want to live. That's great. Problem is, in San Francisco, it's a little different than that. It's not always easy in San Francisco. San Francisco, multifamily housing is broken up into condos and tenants in common. What is a tenants in common? We're going to talk about that today. My name is David Manch with David Manch Real Estate. I'm a realtor in San Francisco, and I help people buy and sell homes in San Francisco and condos and tenants in common. If you're looking to move to San Francisco because you need to relocate, or you just want to relocate within the city, or you just love the city, I'd really love to hear from you. On my channel, we're going to discuss real estate, things like what's the difference between tenants in common and condo, but we're also getting into the neighborhoods so you can see what neighborhood you'd like to live in. I'll show you what's different about each neighborhood, and then we'll talk about some price points. You can find out if that neighborhood's affordable for you. If this is your first time on my channel and you want to know all about life and living in San Francisco, hit that subscribe button. You'll be first to know all about living in this amazing city. All my information is in the description below. Hit me up, and I'd love to make your move to San Francisco a successful and happy one. So, why are there tenants in common? A few decades ago, prices in San Francisco, real estate prices were going through the roof. And on top of that, San Francisco has rent control, a great rent control city. The rent control, they weren't making enough money, and so they weren't reinvesting back into their properties. So landlords wanted to find a way, how are they going to make some money? So what the landlords ended up doing is they found that if they sold each of their units off individually as condos, they'd make more money than if they just sold the building as a whole, because prices were going up so fast. The problem with that is they started taking a lot of inventory out of the rental market. And once again, San Francisco is a rent control city. San Francisco is very protective about their rentals. So when San Francisco got wind of this, they kind of started to put the kibosh on this, and they started putting restrictions on condo sales to protect the housing and the affordable rents. To get around this, landlords started coming up with TIC, tenants in common. Tenants in common is when every tenant in the building owns the building as a whole. So the landlord is basically selling the whole building to a group of people. San Francisco did not like that at all. They tried to limit TICs. They even actually went to court and lost in court. And so the TICs were here to stay. Now we have to get into what exactly is a tenants in common, or we know it as a TIC. It's like a condo. It walks like a condo, it talks like a condo, but it's not a condo. They're both multifamily housing. So you can have, let's say there's 4 units in a building. In a condo, all 4 units are owned separately by the tenants, and then they'll pay into an HOA for maintenance and things like that. With the tenants in common, all of the tenants own all of the building. So you don't own your unit like you would with a condo. You own a percentage of the building. And that percentage of the building is determined by a contract. So with condos, you have a deed to your space, whatever's there. With TIC, there's a deed to the building, which everybody who's a tenant in the building, they're on that deed for the building. The percentage you own and the unit you live in is determined contractually. And the contract is usually created by an attorney, and that contract is what governs the TIC. With the TIC, because you own the building together, taxes are paid together, utilities are paid together, and it's like you're a single entity. The TIC contract has nothing to do with the deed. It is something that's done after. And so usually TIC buildings already have that contract in place. It's already put on. So let's say you buy into a TIC. There's a contract that's already there. You have to accept that contract. That comes with your percentage ownership in a TIC. Your rights and your claim to use the unit is all determined by a contract. So as you see, it may get a little messy with a TIC, and you would ask yourself, why would I want to do that? Well, it's a little cheaper to buy a TIC. TICs are actually 15 to 20% cheaper than condos to buy, but they do appreciate the same rate that condos do. So it's not like you're losing out on your appreciation while you're living there, while you own the property. The price of your TIC, your unit that's in that multifamily housing, is all determined by different things. Your square footage, your square footage compared to others, the desirability, the floor it's on, views, all of that. And that is all part of the contract as well. The mortgages are all paid individually though. It used to be with TICs, there was one mortgage and everybody paid into that mortgage together. Things have come a long way since TICs first started. Now there's individual mortgages, which are called fractional loans. So if you want to buy a TIC, you would go and you'd find a lender. Not all lenders do fractional loans, by the way, but you would find somebody who does that, and you will get a fractional loan, and then you'll be responsible for that loan. Fractional loans have decreased risk to the TIC, where before it would have been harder. Let's say back before they had fractional loans, if somebody couldn't pay their portion of it, that could put everybody into default. That's not the case any longer. So a lot of the risks that used to come with TICs, a lot of those have been taken out, especially with the fractional loans have really, really helped out a lot. And the fractional loan is secured by your percentage of the building. For a long time, people thought that TICs were inferior to a condo, at least for a purchase-wise. That's changed a lot, and it's become more comfortable to buy a TIC than it used to be, once again, because of things like fractional loans and other things. But people are doing it, and it's working out really well. And there's, like I said, there's not much difference. It is basically a condo in another disguise. And that's what a TIC is. The difference is legalities and ownership and the deed, who's on the deed and how the deed is taken. So you may be thinking, well, it's a good way of being able to get into the market and buy a little cheaper and buy to a neighborhood I want to. So what are the pros of buying a TIC? First thing, it's a less purchase price. As I said, it's about 15 to 20% cheaper to buy a TIC than a condo. That's just the way that it is, and when you go to sell it, it's probably going to be the way that is. But remember, it still appreciates at the same rate a condo does, and that means that while you're living in that property, or while you own it at least, your property is appreciating along with the same rate that a condo does. And if you decide to rent it out, let's say you buy it and you're going to rent it out, or you were living there and you're going to move to another spot and rent it out, you get to charge the same price as a condo does, because nobody knows the difference on that ownership. Like I said, it's just the deed, and so nobody will know. But TICs were built before 1979, and that's the cutoff San Francisco gave it, that after that could be condo, before that TIC. There's other ways to take a TIC and make it a condo. You have to apply to the city, and it's a pretty complicated process that I'm not going to get into here. But if you want to rent out your property, you're going to be under rent control, because rent control is for units that were built before 1979. So you have to take that into consideration. You can't give out rent increases as if it's a condo. Also, buying a TIC is one of the cheapest ways to get into the San Francisco market. You can buy into a neighborhood that you actually want. So if you can't afford to buy a home in the Marina, Pacific Heights, which a lot of people can't, but in the neighborhood that you really want, you may be able to buy a TIC that's there. Even a condo, if it might be a little out of price for you in a neighborhood that you really want to live in. And so the TIC may be a great way for you to get into that neighborhood and be where you want to live. There are also cons against buying a TIC, or, there's negative aspects to everything, but here's some of the negative aspects for a TIC. There's some legal complexities in there. Once again, all the contracts that control the TICs, they were written by an attorney, and they're pretty tight. And you should read that whole contract before you buy that unit. Not reading it is just not a good idea. Read the contract. Know what's in that contract before you go through with that sale. Also, it rarely happens, but what happens if one of the other tenants that are in there that have one of the other units in your building, they don't pay for the insurance, they don't pay for the repairs, they don't help pay for the utilities. They may have lost a job or something like that, and they're not paying. What do you do? There's legalities that go with that as well, and you have to go through a legal process to make sure you get it. But in the meantime, you and the rest of your tenants are going to still be responsible for all those payments. Another con is fractional mortgage. It's nice to be able to get that fractional mortgage, so you can do that, and it's made buying a TIC so much easier. But fractional mortgages usually have higher interest rates, a higher down payment, higher monthly payment, and there's not as many vendors. It's the vendors that do fractional mortgages, there's not a lot of them that do that. I happen to work with a couple that do fractional mortgages, but not everybody does it. And lastly, TICs are a little bit harder to sell. They sit on the market a little bit longer, and again, when you go to sell it, yeah, it was great that you didn't have to pay as much as you would for a condo, but you're also going to sell it for less than a condo that could be right next door or just down the street. So condos and TIC, tenants in common, are very similar. They're almost the same thing, but they're not. You need to know this, and especially if you're going and you're looking for multi-family housing as opposed to a single-family home. You need to know these facts before you go at it, because they're listed as TIC and they're listed as condo. You'll know that before you even go look at the property, hopefully, unless you're just going and walking through open houses or things like that. So I wanted to give you some information about this. I don't want to discourage you about TICs, because TICs are a really, really great way of getting in the market. And it's like I said, there's not much of it. There's some beautiful TICs out there. There really, really are. It just happens they're in buildings that were built before 1979, and there's some really great charm in those buildings. And most all neighborhoods are going to have some TIC. And so don't be discouraged by that. It's just, you have to be a little bit more prepared for it. You have to be able to have lending for it, and you need to read that contract before. But TIC is a really great way to get into the market, especially in San Francisco, where it is very expensive. So I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have any more questions about TIC, condos, single-family house, or anything like that, please let me know. My contact's in the description below, and I'd love to hear from you. Thanks a lot.